to tell us we're recording, which hopefully will happen soon. It's a little slow this morning. Maybe. There we go. All right. Good morning and welcome to Bible study for December 23rd. I am Mother Tracy Duggar, and it is a joy to welcome you here today. We are in the book of Numbers, and we are studying from the New Living Translation. The New Living Translation is my preferred translation for Bible study because it presents everything at approximately a 9th grade reading level. And when available, it uses gender neutral pronouns. Lots of the Bible in Hebrew is not gendered. And then later, as it was translated through Greek and into English, gendering was added. And so this translation has gone back to the Hebrew and gone back to gender neutral where the original was gender neutral. So that's why I like it. But it does retain all the other information. So we're going to go forward with chapter 10, and we ended last week talking about these silver trumpets. The Lord said to Moses, "Make 2 trumpets of hammered silver for calling the community to assemble and for signaling the breaking of camp." So when the trumpets are blown, everyone must gather before at the entrance of the tabernacle, but only if the trumpet is blown. If it's only blown once, then only the leaders and the heads of the clans must present themselves. If it's blown twice, everyone gathers. That sounds like basic, normal community organization, but it's significant here. Because remember, we've been talking about the fiery cloud is what's leading the people. And so when it pulls up is when they're to get ready to move. But what I like here is that even though it's plainly visible for everyone to see, it's still the responsibility of the leaders to coordinate the timing of getting ready to break camp and who's needed to do that. Is it just the leaders gathering together for a meeting, or is it the whole congregation of the people of Israel? And so we still do this in organizing our churches today. Sometimes we have meetings that are just, the wardens and the rector. Sometimes we have meetings that's the vestry, which is all the elected leaders. And sometimes we have an open parish meeting to discuss things that are really important that everybody needs to know. And so this is very similar. And these trumpets are meant to help them do that. So verse 5, when you sound the signal to move on, the tribes camped on the east side must break camp and move forward. When you sound the signal a second time, the tribes camped on the south will follow. You must sound short blasts as the signal for moving forward. But when you call the people to an assembly, blow the trumpets with a different signal. Only the priests, Aaron's descendants, are allowed to blow the trumpets. This is a permanent law for you to be observed from generation to generation. Fun little thing in Episcopal polity, to call a special session of the vestry, you have to give notice of it and you have to have the rector involved. You can't work around that. And some of this we get from here, the idea that the priests are the ones responsible for this part. Verse 9, when you arrive in your own land and go to war against your enemies who attack you, sound the alarm with trumpets. So right here is a reiteration that they can expect to go to war when they arrive in the promised land. Now remember, God had them count all the fighting people beforehand. And now here again, God is saying, you're going to have a battle when you get there. But then the Lord your God will remember you and rescue you from your enemies. So there has to be an act of faithfulness first. The people have to go into and be willing to engage in this battle. But then once that occurs, God will rescue them and deliver them from the enemies. Verse 10, blow the trumpets in times of gladness too, sounding them at your annual festivals and at the beginning of each month, and blow the trumpets over your burnt offerings and peace offerings. The trumpets will remind your God of his covenant with you. I am the Lord your God. So we as Episcopalians use this as justification for using all kinds of music in our services to God. because God here said, make some trumpets and use them at the festivals. So oftentimes you'll have brass at Christmas or Easter, as well as our normal choir and piano. And we think that that is good and pleasing and holy to God. Now, there are other Christian traditions and offshoots that say, no music, it can lead you into idolatry. But Episcopalians are not that people. We say the more music, the better, except at our early service, right one, no music. But we have something for everyone. So verse 11, now finally the Israelites are ready to leave Sinai. So we've had, all of the book of Leviticus, and a good chunk of Exodus has occurred as Moses was gathered with God on Mount Sinai. And now finally, 10 chapters into Numbers, they are ready to leave. That was quite the mountaintop meeting between Moses and God. Now, this wasn't all just one session, but it was very much a long season of getting information and direction from God. And now they're ready to leave. So in the second year, after Israel's departure from Egypt, on the 20th day of the second month, the cloud lifted from the tabernacle of the covenant. So the Israelites set out from the wilderness of Sinai and traveled on from place to place until the cloud stopped in the wilderness of Paran. When the people set out for the first time, following the instructions the Lord had given through Moses, Judah's troops led the way. They marched behind their banner, and their leader was Nahshon, son of Amminadab. They were joined by the troops of the tribes of Issachar, led by Nethanel, son of Zuar, and the troops of the tribe of Zebulun, led by Eliab, son of Helon. Then the tabernacle was taken down, and the Gershonite and Meronite divisions of the Levites were next in line of the march, carrying the tabernacle with them. Reuben's troops were next, marching behind their banner. Their leader was Elizur, son of Shadur. They were joined by the troops of the tribe of Simeon, led by Shelumiel of Zurishaddai, and the troops of the tribes of Gad, led by Eliasaph, son of Duel. Next came the Kohathite division of the Levites, carrying the sacred objects of the tabernacle. Before they arrived at the next camp, the tabernacle will already be set up at its new location. Ephraim's troops went next, marching behind their banner. Their leader was Elishama, son of Ammihud. They were joined by the troops of the tribe of Manasseh, led by Gamaliel, son of Pedahzur, and the troops of the tribe of Benjamin, led by Abidan, son of Gideoni. Dan's troops went last, marching behind their banner and serving as the rear guard for all the tribal camps. Their leader was Ahiezer, son of Ammishaddai. They were joined by the troops of the tribe of Asher, led by Pagiel, son of Ochran, and the troops of the tribe of Naphtali, led by Ahira, son of Enan. This was the order in the Israelites marched, division by division. So we don't march as a group of people very often anymore, except our armies and our armed forces who have the charge of taking battle. But this was how the Israelites moved as an entire camp and group of about 500,000 people. It took organization. It took a whole lot of planning. And the reason for those banners was to help people to stay in their portion of the march, to keep it from just becoming one big glob of chaos. And so one of the things that we do at Diocesan Convention in normal years, not pandemic, is when the churches who are marching in the procession come, they bring their banner with them if they have a church banner. And it kind of says, oh, look, this is the Church of the Nativity. This is the Church of the Messiah. This is the Church of the Ascension. And it just is a lovely way to see the various parts and pieces that make up our whole diocese. And that's part of where we get those types of traditions from, is in this portion of the Bible. But they're doing their march, and one day Moses says to his brotherland, Hobab, son of Ruel, the Midianite, we are on our way to the place the Lord promised us, for he said, I will give it to you. Come with us, and we will treat you well, for the Lord has promised wonderful blessings for Israel. But Hobab replied, no, I will not go. I must return to my own land and family. Please don't leave us, Moses pleaded. You know the places in the wilderness where we should camp. Come be our guide. If you do, we'll share with you all the blessings the Lord gives us. They marched for 3 days after leaving the mountain of the Lord with the Ark of the Covenant, moving ahead of them to show them where to stop and rest. As they moved on each day, the cloud of the Lord hovered over them, and wherever the ark set out, Moses would shout, Arise, O Lord, and let your enemies be scattered. Let them flee before you. And when the ark was set down, he would say, Return, O Lord, to the countless thousands of Israel. So this is how they're going to keep moving from camp to camp and place to place until they get to the promised land. But they don't go very far on their journey before things stop going smoothly. If any of you have taken a road trip with extended family members, you don't get very far down the road before someone needs to stop for some reason or another. And soon, in chapter 11, the people began to complain about their hardship, and the Lord heard everything they said. Then the Lord's anger blazed against them, and he sent a fire to rage among them, and he destroyed some of the people in the outskirts of the camp. Then the people screamed to Moses for help, and when he prayed to the Lord, the fire stopped. After that, the area was known as Taberah, which means the place of burning, because the fire from the Lord had burned among them there. Then the foreign rabble who were traveling with the Israelites began to crave the good things of Egypt. And the people of Israel also began to complain. Oh, for some meat, they exclaimed. We remember the fish we used to eat for free in Egypt, and we had all the cucumbers, melons, leeks, onions, and garlics we wanted. But now our appetites are gone. All we see is this manna. So essentially, it did take them but 2 years off in the wilderness to go, oh, remember the good old days when we were slaves in Egypt, but we had as much as we wanted to eat. And again, what is manna? The manna looked like small coriander seeds and was pale yellow like gum resin. The people would go out and gather it from the ground, and they made flour by grinding it with hand mills or pounding it in mortars. Then they boiled it in a pot and made it into flat cakes. These cakes tasted like pastries baked with olive oil. The manna came down on the camp with the dew during the night. So they've essentially been surviving off of bread from God for a while now. And I don't know how often you get sick of eating leftovers, but I'm a rather spoiled individual. I can eat something once for dinner, and then the next day I can either eat it for lunch or dinner. But I don't want to have it for 2 meals in a row, 3 meals in a row, 4 meals in a row. It just loses its appeal. So the fact that they made it 2 years without whining too terribly much is impressive to me, but they're ready to whine now. And so Moses hears all of the families standing in the doorways of their tents whining, and the Lord became extremely angry. Moses was also very aggravated. And Moses said to the Lord, Why are you treating me, your servant, so harshly? Have mercy on me. What did I do to deserve the burden of all these people? Did I give birth to them? Did I bring them into the world? Why did you tell me to carry them in my arms like a mother carries a nursing baby? How can I carry them to the land you swore to give to their ancestors? Where am I supposed to go to get meat for all these people? They keep whining to me, saying, Give us meat to eat. Verse 14, I can't carry all these people by myself. The load is far too heavy. If this is how you intend to treat me, just go ahead and kill me. Do me a favor and spare me this misery. This is a lovely word of caution for people who are leaders in a church or people who are leading any group of people, that if you take on all of the wants and needs and desires of everyone in your care, it will be way, way too much. It's too heavy. You can't please everyone, and you can take care of people and make sure that they have their needs met. But if you begin trying to take care of everyone's wants, it gets far too big of a job. And that's always a balance because many priests and church leaders tend to be people pleasers. They tend to be people who want to make people happy. I would include myself in this category. But it's impossible once you get above a certain church size to keep everyone happy all the time. And so you have to find a way to deal with the grumbling or to deal with the discontent around certain individuals because you trust that you're following the leadership of God and you're going in the right direction and you're doing the right things. It's just not yielding the results that people want to see yet. And so Moses says, I would rather die than carry a burden this heavy. And God lets him say that. God says, you need to vent. Fine. Okay. But then out of that vent comes great wisdom. Verse 16. Then the Lord said to Moses, gather before me 70 men who are recognized as elders and the leaders of Israel. Bring them to the tabernacle to stand there with you. I will come down and talk to you there. I will take some of the spirit that is upon you, and I will put the spirit upon them also. They will bear the burden of the people along with you, so you will not have to carry it alone. So my little side note in my Bible, because I have margins where you can take notes, says holy delegation. For Christian leaders, the Spirit already dwells among all of the baptized. It is up to us to raise up people and conversely, to allow people to unburden us. And then I wrote, you have not because you ask not. Oftentimes we're doing too much because we just don't ask for help, or we don't identify the people who maybe could help us. And so Moses goes through this time of trial where he tries to do everything before, and God lets him do it. God lets him take on too much and to carry all the burden himself. And finally, when Moses gets fed up and to the end of his rope and says, I can't do this anymore, God's like, well, of course you can't. But I was waiting for you to figure that out. And now that you have, here's these 70 leaders that you should use. And so God says to the people, purify yourselves, for tomorrow there will be meat to eat. You were whining, and the Lord heard you when you cried, oh, for some meat. We were better off in Egypt. Now the Lord will give you meat, and you will have to eat it. And it won't just be for a day or two, or for 5 or 10 or even 20. You will eat it for a whole month until you gag and are sick of it. For you have rejected the Lord who is here among you, and you have whined to him, saying, why did we ever leave Egypt? So do you think God was really mad at the people because they wanted something new to eat? I don't. I think God was mad at the people because rather than coming to God and approaching him or Moses directly with their wants and saying, listen, we're really appreciative that we're not starving, but we would really like something else. We would really like some meat. And could we ask God to provide? I think if that had happened, God would have provided the meat and they would have had a lovely time and a festival. Instead, what happens is this bubbling of discontent and this grumbling along the fringes, not the fridges. And you hear about the very edges being the places where discontent is bubbling over into a fire within the people. And this happens still today in churches where people, rather than approaching leadership or approaching the vestry with their concerns or the things that they're hoping to see, will begin murmurings among themselves and the friends that they have along the way to say, hey, what is this even happening? And we were better off under this leader or that leader, or back in this day, back in my day. And God really doesn't like that. And God does something, says, look, I'm going to satisfy your wants more than you ever even asked for, so much so that you're going to eat meat until you're sick of it. And so that is what happens. Verse 21, but Moses responded to the Lord, there are 600 foot soldiers here with me, and yet you say I will give them meat for a whole month? Even if we butchered all our flocks and herds, would that satisfy them? Even if we caught all the fish in the sea, would that be enough? Then the Lord said to Moses, has my arm lost its power? Now you will see whether or not my word comes true. And again, here we have something that happens in all of us. We have Moses hearing a promise from God, hearing God say, I'm going to do this. And Moses, again, instead of trusting in the leadership and delegation and possibilities, goes, how am I possibly going to provide all that meat? We'd go broke. All our flocks would be killed off, and it still wouldn't be enough. And God goes, if I'm promising it, don't you think I'm going to provide it? And there's always this tension within churches and within individuals as people of faith, where we hear the promises of God and we even discern the call of what God is asking us to do. But rather than asking God for help and for power and wisdom and resources and means, we look at what we have and the time that we have and the energy we have and the finances we have, and we go, how am I ever going to do that? That's part of why I like to teach the Old Testament, because it's not old. It's from long ago, but it's all the same things that we still struggle with today. So Moses goes out and reports the Lord's words to the people. He gathered 70 elders and stationed them around the tabernacle. And the Lord came down in a cloud and spoke to Moses. That he gave the 70 elders the same spirit that was upon Moses. And when the spirit rested upon them, they prophesied. But this never happened again. So the prophecy is a proof that they have the presence of the Spirit within them, but it never happens again. And so we have gifts and fruits of the Spirit, some of which are permanent, some of which are something that God gives for an individual forever, as long as they're faithful. And sometimes you have fruits of the Spirit that are just for a moment when they are needed. And that's what happens here. They have the fruit of the Spirit for a moment when it is needed to confirm their actions as being reputable elders of the Lord. So sometimes people prophesy in the right time, in the right place with God's help, but that doesn't mean that they can replicate it or do it forever. Verse 26, 2 men, Eldad and Medad, this is my favorite dad joke in the Bible because you can make much of those names, had stayed behind in the camp. They were listed among the elders, but they had not gone out to the tabernacle. So they were listed as, hey, you should show up. We're calling on you. But they went, nah, I don't think so. I'm busy. I don't want to. But what happens anyway? Yet the Spirit rested upon them as well. So they prophesied there in the camp. You can't really escape the call of God. Ask any priest or any person who has become a brother or sister, nun, all kinds of people who've dedicated their life to God. If you ask them, well, how did that happen? Everybody's story that I've heard has included, well, I first heard the call here, but then I fought and wrestled with it for this number of years. I first heard my call probably in 2006. I had been active in leading student ministry in Purdue University for about 3-4 years. And I felt the call to ministry and I went, nah, I don't want to do that. I want to be a librarian. I'm going to go my way. I get out of undergraduate school. I do my thing. I try and get a job shelving books while I'm going to grad school, and I can't even get a job shelving books in a library. And I go, ooh, maybe I need to think about this. So I worked for Disney for a little while I thought about things. And I was like, God, why can't I get where I want to go? And God's like, because it's not where I want you to, dummy. So when I finally agreed to go back into pursuing God's call for my life, all the doors opened. I got some scholarships. I got into grad school, no problem, for my MDiv, and things went relatively smoothly because I was going the route God had intended for me. I think there are people who have a call in their lives that is inescapable, as Eldad and Medad find out. But the people are not so happy about this. Verse 28, Joshua, son of Nun, who had been Moses' assistant since his youth, protested, Moses, my master, make them stop. But Moses replied, are you jealous for my sake? I wish that all the Lord's people were prophets, and the Lord would put his spirit upon them all. Then Moses returned to the camp with the elders of Israel. Sometimes you get people who you don't expect to rise to leadership, and sometimes they don't look like your typical good Episcopalian in our church, or they don't look like someone who was someone we would expect for God to call into leadership. And sometimes people try and actively work against those people assuming roles of leadership or spiritual authority. But the thing is I believe that the fruits of the Spirit are fully recognizable. And if you see fruit, then you need to trust that God is at work in those people, whether they're people you would choose to work with or not. God has already chosen to do so. So Moses goes back to the camp, and God fulfills the next promise. The Lord sends quail. Now the Lord sent a wind that brought quail from the sea and let them fall around the camp for miles in every direction. There were quail flying about 3 feet above the ground. So the people went out and caught all the quail that day throughout the night and the next day too. No one gathered less than 50 bushels. They spread the quail all around the camp to dry, but while they were gorging themselves on the meat, while it was still in their mouths, the anger of the Lord blazed against the people, and he struck them with a severe plague. And you go, wait, God said he was going to give them meat. Why would he suddenly, right after doing a nice thing, do a mean thing by sending a plague? And the key context here is what the people are doing. They've gathered up all of these bushes, but you hear they're gorging themselves. They are, instead of eating to satisfy their physical hunger, they're shoving as much as they can in their mouth. And why? Scarcity thinking. The fear that there won't be enough, the fear that they won't get their fair share, and the fear that this is a one-off thing that's never going to happen again. And so they may never taste meat again, so let's eat all we can. So the people still are not trusting the Lord's words, even though he just gave them a very visible sign of 70 elders who prophesied, including the 2 who didn't even show up to the ceremony, but are prophesying in the camp. But none of that gets the people to really trust in God's provision and care for them as individuals. Now remember, God has promised a whole month of meat, and yet they're eating everything that they can grab. That is why there's a plague. This happens. This happens a lot. I would argue it's happening in churches across the country right now. Many of us were blessed to receive a PPP loan, which gave us the funds to keep going in the pandemic, which was vitally necessary when it came in. I got to tell you, there was a couple weeks in March where we brought in a total of $200. If we had not gotten the PPP loan when we got it, we would have been in a world of trouble. But people settled in, their faith, they were able to trust, and giving improved, and we were able to make it through the end of the year pretty much right on track. We had to cut a lot of expenses to match our income, but we're doing okay. And yet still, as we go forward to pass a budget for next year, we have people going, but we don't know what's going to happen. What if God, what if there's not enough? What if? And it's important to balance these anxiety fears of not enough in the future with the current testimony that there is enough and God is providing in this moment. And so there's a reason to trust that God will provide in the next as well. So what happens? Verse 34, that place was called Kibroth Hattaavah, which means graves of gluttony, because there they buried the people who had craved meat from Egypt. From Kibroth Hattaavah, the Israelites traveled to Hazeroth, where they stayed for some time. So this plague seemingly struck down only those people who were acting in mistrust of the Lord and being a glutton. And now they've moved on. And you would think, complaining isn't working out very well for us. Maybe we should try praise and thanksgiving with request. But that's not what happens. Chapter 12. While they were at Hazeroth, Miriam and Aaron criticized Moses because he had married a Cushite woman. They said, "Has the Lord spoken only through Moses? Hasn't he spoken through us too?" But the Lord heard them. I underlined this next verse with a smiley face because it's kind of funny to me. Now Moses was very humble, more humble than any other person on earth. And I added the little subscript. Writes Moses. Now remember, Moses is the author of all this. So Moses has just said, "I'm the most humble person ever." Possibly true, but also possibly an amusing anecdote in giving us insight into how Moses is feeling at the time. So what happens? What does God do with these grumblings and complaints? Verse 4. So immediately the Lord called to Moses, Aaron, and Miriam and said, "Go out to the tabernacle, all three of you." So the three of them went to the tabernacle. Then the Lord descended in the pillar of cloud and stood at the entrance of the tabernacle. "Aaron and Miriam," he cried, and they stepped forward. And the Lord said to them, "Now listen to what I say. If there were prophets among you, I, the Lord myself, would reveal myself in visions. I would speak to them in dreams, but not with my servant Moses. Of all my house, he is the one I trust. I speak to him face to face, clearly, and not in riddles. He sees the Lord as he is. So why were you not afraid to criticize my servant Moses?" Again, there's nothing that's happened so far that says Moses wasn't free to marry a Cushite woman. In fact, the whole schema of the Israelite community is to be a community set apart so that other nations will be drawn to the Lord their God. So as long as a foreigner engages in the worship of the Lord and follows the norms of this new Israelite community, they are to be treated as an equal in the eyes of the Lord. And yet from the very beginning, we have people who are wanting to set boundaries between those people and the good, holy people. And this is a trend that's going to continue on throughout Judean history, all the way to the time of Jesus, where we see there are Pharisees and Sadducees and different sects within Judean history that say, we are the right kind of people. But God, verse 9, is very angry with them, and he departs. As the cloud moved from the tabernacle, there stood Miriam, her skin as white as snow from leprosy. When Aaron saw what had happened to her, he cried out to Moses, "Oh, my master, please don't punish us for this sin we have so foolishly committed. Don't let her be like a stillborn baby already destroyed at birth." So Moses cried out to the Lord, "Oh God, I beg you, please heal her." But the Lord said to Moses, "If her father had done nothing more than spit in her face, wouldn't she be defiled for 7 days? So keep her outside the camp for 7 days, and after that she may be accepted back." Here we have something that can seem somewhat harsh. Miriam gets leprosy for talking back. Aaron seemingly doesn't. But they immediately say, sorry, 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 we're so sorry, and please heal her. And God says, listen, even when you're sorry, there are consequences for your action. And an appropriate consequence for it to be for her to be set apart for 7 days before being welcomed back. I think where Christianity and modern society has gone off the rails is we've become a place where as long as you're sorry, that's okay. And the idea that you can't judge anyone or hold ill will or malice towards someone anymore as soon as they say the magic words, I'm sorry. But in reality, we serve a God who is not just lovely and all forgiving, although he is that, but God is also just. There is a requirement to pay a penalty. Jesus paid the eternal penalties for our sins, but there are still earthly consequences for our actions. There needs to be accountability for God's people within the community. Otherwise, we become a place where we treat each other terribly. And as long as we say, oh, my bad, I'm sorry, all is well. Does that sound like a community of God that you want to be a part of? Because it's not for me. And so God teaches the Israelites and teaches us there needs to be accountability when we misbehave and when we malign other people's choices and when we talk badly about others, both to their face and behind their back. So Miriam was kept outside the camp for 7 days, and the people waited until she was brought back before they traveled again. So here's the other side of that. They didn't leave her. They waited for her to be welcomed back before moving on. That's the other side. We need to be a people who can hold people accountable for appropriate consequences, but then fully engage in the grace of welcoming people back within our community. I don't think anybody's gotten that balance exactly right. But if we did, we would be one step closer to the kingdom to come. So Miriam was kept, and then they left Hazeroth and camped in the wilderness of Paran. So we're going to leave off there, and I'm going to end the recording, but we're not going to have Bible study next week. We're going to take a break between Christmas and New Year's, and we'll come back the week after to pick up with chapter 13. All right, so stop the recording.